Let me show you what that means. My first thing I'm going to do on any inspection is I'm going to walk up and look at this truck. I'm going to look at the lights up on top. I'm going to look at the glass. I'm going to look at the structure of the hood. I'm going to look at the front bumper. I'm going to look at the grill. I'm going to look at the headlights and turn signals. Is the glass broken? Is anything cattywampus? Right now, I walk up, this truck is leaning. The first thing I'm going to look is, why is it leaning? Is it the floor is tilted? Is a spring broken on one side? Why is this truck leaning? Does that give you a clue that there might be something wrong? Okay, so going through with it, the easiest that you're going to do after you've done that, I'm going to look underneath the truck. Have I got any fluids? Have I got any puddles? Have I got anything leaking? Is the thing sitting terrible? Are the tires flat? Is the rim right on the ground? All things that I can do as I walk up to this truck. The easiest for this is to start with your pre-trip inspection. Opening the latches. I'm now going to open the hood. Okay? As I open the hood, I've never even played with this truck. I've seen it a couple times. The easiest is to start with the engine compartment. We all walk over. We get over here on this left side. I'm going to come down to that side in just 1 second. So using that same pattern, I'm going to go front to back. I'm going to go top to bottom. So as I look up here at the front and up high, the first thing I'm going to see is my radiator. All the pieces and parts are tight. All my radiator housing. I'm going to get back to my coolant level. My coolant level, the level is up to the sight glass to the full level. All the hoses coming off of that aren't leaking. I'm going to come on back down the engine. I'm going to check all the components of the engine that there aren't any leaks. The hoses aren't leaking. The block's not leaking. All of the nuts and bolts are where they're supposed to be. Clear back into the air cleaner that it's all in good shape. I'm going to start coming down. As I come down a little bit lower, I'm going to come back. I'm going to start looking at my fan shroud. Make sure all of the parts are tight. All the hoses again are tight. They're not leaking. All the connections. I'm going to look inside at my fan, that all the blades are in good shape. The next thing I come back to are the belts. Are the belts, are they tight? Are they secure? Are they cut, damaged, frayed? And if I push on the belts, I'm going to check the deflection of the belts. That pushing on them, they move no more than 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. That means your belts are in adjustment. The idler pulleys and everything are in good shape. As I come on back a little bit further, I'm going to start looking at all the connections. I've got hoses going down. They're tucking back in here. They're going to the water pump. This has an internal water pump. Going through with that, it's not leaking. There's no damage control, any fluids running out of that, not only from the hose, but from the water pump itself. As I come on back a little bit further, I'm getting into the beginning of my exhaust system. I don't care, it's not on the test, it's not on that sheet, but I'm still going to look at my turbo. I'm going to look at the exhaust pipes. I'm going to look at all the hoses going through. I don't care whether you know this is your heater or your air conditioning hoses. That just the hoses aren't leaking. I'm going to come on down a little bit further. The next thing I'm going to look at is my frame. That there's no cuts, breaks, illegal welds on my frame. Make sure it's all in good shape. Everything else is in good physical condition. I don't see any leaks of any type, any nuts, bolts, or anything like that that's falling off. Being the wheels are turned and everything else, that's fine. You're only required to inspect one side of the vehicle for this test. The engine compartment, it's easier because you've got pieces and parts on both sides to do both sides of the engine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave this side. I'm going to go back over to the other side. Okay? Okay, as I come back over on this side, I'm going to start right back up the front. I'm going to look at my radiator. I'm going to look at my power or my coolant level up on top. How many times have I talked about that? Twice. You only required one. But I've talked about it over there, and now I've talked about it over here. If I forgot it on that side, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to come across, I'm going to check all the hoses. If you told me that you're going to check your coolant level again, I'll tell you, hey, that's good enough, move on. If you didn't say anything about it and you say, hey, all this stuff looks good, I can ask you what looks good. I need to hear that coolant level. Come on down, I'm going to check my fan, my belts, all my components and my hoses are all in good shape. Everything's tight. I'm going to check my fan belts again. Did we do it on the other side? Okay. What's the deflection on the fan belt? 1/2 to 3/4. Good. Going through with that. As I come on back a little bit further, hey, here's my alternator. I'm going to make sure it's secure, it's tight, the belts are good. This is a belt-driven water heater or alternator. I'm going to check that the electrical connections are all good. So I come on back, I'm going to check the rest of the hoses. So I come on down a little bit more, I find the dipstick to the engine. I'm going to check that my dipstick. I may ask you, how are you going to do that? I'll pull it out, clean it off, push it back in, pull it back out again, make sure it's in the check marks between the add and the fill. As I come on down a little bit further, I'm going to come on down on this one. I haven't got a flashlight on this one. Usually the air compressor. This one might be tucked clear back here by the frame, or it's on the other side.
I believe it's on the other side.
It's on the other side.
Yeah, top right there.
Yep. Okay. Your air compressor is mounted on the opposite side. Going through with that, some of the Volvos are set up clear back here behind the frame. All the lines going to your air compressor are tight secured. Most of your Volvos are gear driven, means there's no belts going to them. They're all tight and secure. So I come on down, I'm going to check all the wiring, all the components, no hoses, no leaks, anything of that nature. I'm going to come back to the front. As I come on down a little bit left, I'm going to check my power steering fluid. It's got a dipstick on it. I can pull the dipstick out, make sure the fluid's to the up position. As I come on down, I'm going to check all the hoses. Power steering pump is mounted down below. Everything's tight and secure, no leaks on it. I'm going to check my frame, making sure all of it's secured. As I come on out a little bit further, I'm going to check my hoses again, going to my steering box. Make sure my steering box is tight and secure. I'm going to go down and I'm going to check all my linkages. On the inside of this, you got a pitman arm, comes off the steering box. You've got the drag link, tie rods going across. I want to make sure nothing is bent, cracked, damaged. All the nuts and bolts, the castle nuts are on, and all the keys and everything that lock these pins in place are all tight, just like this one down here. As I come on down a little bit lower, I'm going to start with my suspension. I've already checked my frame again, no illegal welds. Check my suspension. Going to the front, the first thing I'm going to check is my spring mounts. My spring mounts are tight and secure, both on the front and the rear of my leaf springs. I'm going to check my leaf springs themselves, that they're tight and secure, they're not broke, shifted. I'm going to check the U-bolts in the middle. This one's got assistant airbags back here on the back. Make sure the airbags themselves are tight and secure. I'm going to make sure the mounts for it aren't damaged in any way. I'm going to check my shock absorber. Make sure its connections at the top and the bottom are in good shape. There are no leaks, damage, dents, anything on my shock absorber. As I come out a little bit more, I'm going to check my air hoses. coming my frame out to the air cans. These canister assemblies. They're different setups. You got a single can on the front, usually double cans on the back. There's 2 cans together. Out of the can, there's a rod that comes out. They call it the push rod. It goes down to your slack adjuster, which is the adjustment of the brakes. On level ground, with the tires chocked, your button's pushed in. If I pull on this slack adjuster with it, whether this has got automatic adjusters or not, which this one does have, it will travel no more than 1 inch. That 1 inch is the indication that at the bottom of this slack adjuster, it's a little pork chop looking thing. There's a rod that goes into your tire. It's connected to an S-cam. It's an S piece of metal that there's rollers that your brake shoes roll on. As that push rod goes out, it rotates that S, and those rollers go up on the humps. That's what gives you brake pressure. If it goes more than 1 inch, usually when it gets around 2.5 inches, that S-cam can actually roll over, and those rollers on your brake shoes go to the inside and they'll lock. You now have no brakes whatsoever. There's all kinds of old history that we're not going to get into on how you adjust your brakes. Unless you're a certified brake adjuster or your boss tells you you can do it, don't touch them. You go to a port of entry, that's the only thing they're going to look at. Is that push rod going more than 1 inch? If it is, that truck is shut down. So we come on down, we're checking that adjustment. I'm now looking at the inside of my drums and linings. As I look through it, I'm going to make sure that the brake drums inside aren't damaged. There's no cracks in them, no deep gouges. I'm going to look for oil and grease. I'm going to look for the brake pads, that there's enough thickness. There's either wear bars, kind of a rule of thumb is no more or no less than 1/4 inch of pads. If you come on out, I'm then going to check the inside of my rim, make sure there's no damage to it. I'm going to check the inside of my tire, make sure that there's no cuts, gouges, bulges. I'm going to come out, I'm going to check the tread depth, that the tread depth is proper for the front tire, which is what?
432 seconds.
Okay, 430 seconds, 432s. It's what you're looking for. There's no mismatch going through with the tires. The tire tread is even across the deal. And I'm going to check for inflation of the tire. I'm going to check the outside. I'm going to check my valve stem to check the inflation. I'm going to use a tire gauge. If I don't have a tire gauge, I'm going to use a hammer, tire buddy, a pipe, whatever. This isn't good enough.
No.
Okay, if you're using a tire buddy, a pipe, a hammer, what are you listening for?
A good sound.
What's the good sound?
Not a thud.
Not a thud. If it's a real muffled sound, something like that, you're not doing anything. That means that tire is deflated. You're going to hear either a pinging sound or a real brisk sound as you tap it, as you go through. As I come on down, I'm going to check my rim, check the bead that it's tight. There's no illegal welds, no cracks in the rim. The tire seated properly. I'm going to come down and I'm going to check all my lug nuts, that all of them are tight, secure. There's no rust trails. If that lug nut was loose, you're going to have a star pattern, especially with aluminum rims, that it's going to be black. Going through with some of your steel rims and stuff like that, it may be rust colored as they come off. I'm going to look at the threads on my lug nuts, making sure there are no shiny threads. If you got real shiny silver looking threads, they're loose. I'm going to come on down, I'm going to check my center hub seal, make sure it's tight and secure. I'm going to take a half a step back and I'm going to look at all the rest of the components, making sure the bumper's not falling off, no wiring. Again, I'm looking for any leaks underneath it. As I come on back, I'm going to go up top. I'm going to look at the structure of my cab. I'm going to look at my windshield, that it's tight and secure. There's no illegal stickers, not a bunch of brakes. I'm going to look at my wiper blades on the outside, that they're not damaged. I'm going to come on down the front. I'm going to look at all my hoses, all my electrical. I've got my windshield wiper fluid tucked in behind here, going through with any other fluids that you may have. As I come on back, I'm going to go up top. I'm going to look at my top of my cab itself. I'm going to look at the mirrors, that they're secure. They're tight to the cab. I'm going to look at the glass on them. I'm going to look at my door, that it opens and closes properly. I'm going to come on down. I'm going to check my steps. Under this one, you've got your battery compartment. I'm going to check the batteries. I'm going to check the bottom steps. I've got some tanks. These are my air tanks down here. I'm going to make sure they're secure. As I come on back, I'm going to check all my lights. My side lights, any running lights. I've got a little compartment door, make sure it's tight. Looks like I've got another door back in here. Make sure it's tight and secure. I'm going to come on down, I'm going to check my fuel tank. I'm going to check the straps, make sure the caps are on, everything's tight and secure. I'm going to look under the vehicle, make sure there's nothing leaking. I'm going to continue back. I'm now going to go to the back, I'm going to check my lights. On the far side, I can check my exhaust system. Now for this test, if you can do everything from one side, until the exhaust system is over there, and you're going to check for any leaks, any soot trails, any black marks that are coming out on it, which causes carbon monoxide to come up in the cab and kill you. That's what you're looking for. I'm going to come across the back. I've got hangers for my hoses, both hydraulic hoses, electrical hoses, and my air hoses, making sure they're all tight and secure. I've got lights back here I'm going to check. As I come on back, I'm going to make sure that the hose aren't dangling to where they're going to get caught on something. Brakes, anything like that. Go down a little bit lower. I'm going to check my drive line. Make sure the carrier bearings are all good, the U-joints are all good, it's not bent, twisted, damaged, everything's in alignment. Come on down a little bit more. I'm going to check my steps. Make sure my steps are secure. Going through. As I turn around and come back, hydraulic tank on the far side, not part of the test, but I am looking for any leaks that are coming onto it. As I come on back, I'm going to look at the hydraulic lines, the glad hands, and the electrical lines on the front of the trailer. I'm going to look at the overall condition of the front of the trailer. I've got a toolbox or a compartment tank up here. The frame of the trailer comes on down. The next thing I'm going to come to is my fifth wheel. This has got a bolt adjustable fifth wheel. I'm going to make sure all the nuts and bolts are in place on my fifth wheel, holding it in place. I'm going to look underneath. I'm going to make sure that there's no gap between the top plate and the bottom plate of my fifth wheel. That there's no gap in between here. They're tight together. I'm going to make sure there's grease on this bottom fifth wheel plate. Make sure it's lubricated. If this was uncoupled, I would look at both the top and bottom plate. There's a shaft that comes down from the top of the trailer. It's called the kingpin. That the kingpin shaft isn't bent, twisted, gouged, broken, and the head of the kingpin, which is like the big nut on the head of a big bolt, is in good shape. I'm going to come back, I'm going to look at my locking arm. This handle is in the down and lock position. That if it's a sliding fifth wheel, it does have all the bolts in place for the sliding fifth wheel or the cogs. As I come on down just a little bit further, I'm going to check my frame. Come on back to the inside again, I'm going to check all my axles. I check the front and rear mounts of my suspension. This being my torque arm, which holds the axles in alignment. This torque arm is what keeps your truck going straight down the road. Same thing with your trailer. going through with here. I've got the U-bolts that holds it into place. Back in the back, I've got airbags. I'm going to look at my airbags and the mounts for my airbags, and I've got a shock absorber. I'm going to look at the top and bottom mounts of my shock absorber, that it's not bent. I'm going to come on out. I've got my air cans that are mounted down below. I'm going to check my air line going to them. I'm going to check my push rod, my slack adjuster, just like I did on the front. With the brakes release, I'm going to pull on them. They travel no more than how much? 1 inch. If it's more than an inch, they're out of adjustment. I'm going to go inside. I'm going to check my drums and linings. No breaks in the drums. The linings has proper pad, no oil or grease. Check the inside of the rim, the inside of the tire, the top of the tire. I'm going to check the tread depth on it, which has to be a minimum of 2 30-seconds for all other tires on the vehicle. Front ones are 4 30-seconds, rears are all 2 30-seconds. I'm going to check the space between the tires, that there's no rocks, debris. These have natural bud spacers, the rims are offset, there's no rocks, debris, the tires aren't rubbing together. Tread depth, outside of the tire, no cuts or gouges, properly inflated with a tire iron or a air gauge. I'm going to check my flange, my rims, my lug nuts, and my axle seal, just like I did on the front. As I come on back, I'm going to check my mounts, I'm going to check my frame, I'm going to check the top and side of the trailer. As I'm checking the top and side, I'm looking for all my tie downs. I'm looking at my DOT reflective tape that is secure. I've got running lights down the side. I've got compartment hatches. I'm going to make sure everything is secure. Come on down, I'm going to check my brakes, suspension, tires, rims, lug nuts, axle seals. I'm going to come on back. The next thing I'm going to check is my mud flaps. They cover both tires. They're not damaged. Look at the deck of the trailer. I'm going to look at the mounts again. The next thing I'm coming to is your landing gear, which are the legs for the trailer, that it's unhooked. The legs go down, that the pins are in the proper position. There is a lock on those, and there is clearance between the back of the truck and the trailer, that if you turn, they're not going to bind up. As I come on down, I'm going to look at the deck of the trailer, make sure none of the boards are coming off, that there's no damage to the top deck. I'm going to look at the frame of the trailer down the sides, making sure nothing's broke. I'm going to look at the hangers. I'm going to look at the DOT tape. I'm looking for any lights going through. I'm going to look underneath the trailer, make sure there's no damage, anything hanging down, any hoses, any wires, anything of that nature. I'm going to come on down. I notice there's some more lights back here. Make sure they're not broken. Come on back. I'm getting to the axles. I'm going to start on the inside. The inside of the axles. I'm going to check my suspension. I'm going to make sure all the front and rear mounts for my suspension are tight. I'm going to make sure the torque arm that adjusts your axles, the long rod at the bottom, aren't bent, twisted, damaged. I'm going to check my air hose going to my air can. I'm going to check the push rod with the brakes released. I'm going to check my slack adjuster. I'm going to pull on it. I'm going to go in and check the inside of my drums and linings. No oil, grease, brakes. The linings are good thickness. I'm going to check the inside of my rim, my tires, 2 30-second tread, no cuts, gouges. Check the gap between the tires. Check the outside tire. I'm going to check my rim, my lug nuts, and my axle seal, just like I've been doing. I'm going to come on back a little bit further. Continue, I'm checking the side of the trailer. I'm going to check my DOT reflective tape. How many times have I mentioned DOT tape? 5, 6, 10 times? Guess what? I didn't forget my DOT reflective tape. Come on back a little bit further. Check all my tie downs. Check my decking. I get back here to the back. I'm going to check all the lights back here in the back. I've noticed that all my lights have been orange down the side. Back here on the back, they've now changed to red. I've got turn signals back here, I've got tail lights back here, I've got brake lights back here, and my 3 DOT lights in the middle. Going through with those. This is a beaver tail trailer that hangs more than 5 feet past the back of them. They are not required to have mud flaps if you have at least 5 feet of overhang. It does have mud flaps on it. Going through again, covering both tires, no more than 10 inches off the ground. That's where a lot of your school buses get by not having mud flaps on the back. If it has 5 foot of overhang on any type of trailer, it's not required. If it's got mud flaps, you can name those. Doing the same thing down the other side, everything is basically identical. Okay, questions so far?
That will.
Okay, as I come into the cab, I'm going to go up top, I'm going to look at the structure of my door, I'm going to make sure that the mirrors are secure, the door opens and closes properly, I'm going to check my steps. As I come in, I've got a fire extinguisher. Make sure it's secure. Along with my fire extinguisher, I should have 3 reflective triangles and either circuit breakers or fuses for this specific truck. This truck is new enough, it's probably got circuit breakers on it. Going through with that, as I go through, using my handrails to get up to the top, I'm then going to go through and get into the driver's seat. As I come into the driver's seat, I'm now going to continue on with my front and back, top to bottom situation. The first thing I'm going to look at is my windshield. There's no damage to the windshield, it's clean. There's no cracks, no illegal stickers. I'm then going to check my wipers. I'm going to go through and I'm going to check my wipers control. With it, I go ahead and turn them on. My wipers and my washers make sure they're working properly. And they're controlled right here. And I've never been in this truck other than seeing it. I'm then going to come back down the sides. I'm going to look at my mirrors. I'm making sure that they're secure. There's no damage to them. The side windows are clean. And I'm going to make sure the mirrors are adjusted for me, that I can see where I need to be down the sides of the truck. As I come on back a little bit further, I'm going to check for my seat belt, make sure it works properly. Go ahead and install it, put it on. I'm not going to latch it because I'm going to be climbing around, but making sure it goes back. My door is secure. I'm going to look around on the floor, making sure I haven't got anything rolling around. I'm then going to come back up on top. I'm going to start on the inside. As I go through, I'm going to check all my all my buttons and switches, making sure they're all in the proper position. I'm going to make sure both my brakes are set. Buttons are both pulled out. I'm going to come across, I'm going to look at my dash, that everything is visible, making sure all my gauges are good shape, everything's clean, good shape. At this point, I'm going to go through and I'm going to actually start the vehicle. I'm going to make sure that I'm on level ground, it's in neutral. I'm going to go through. We have a problem with anything starting up in here?
No.
Okay. I'm going to push in my clutch and I'm going to go ahead and start the vehicle. As I start the vehicle, I'm going to come down a little bit further. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check all my gauges. I'm going to check my water temperature, I'm going to check my oil pressure, I'm going to check my voltmeter, make sure I have fuel, and I'm going to check my air gauges over here on the side. I'm going to come across, I'm going to check that my buttons are out again. As I come down a little bit further, I'm going to check my heater and air conditioner, that they're working, that my heater and my defroster are working properly. As I come through with that, I'm going to make sure everything else is tight and secured going through. I'm going to look back here in the back, nothing's rolling around. I've got all my pieces and parts and everything that I need to. I'm now going to go ahead and build up my air pressure. I'm watching my air gauges come up, making sure that they're coming up properly. You are at least over 100 psi. 100 psi is going to release everything. Everything's in good shape. Going through with that. We have now completed pretty much all of the pre-trip inspection. Going through with your pre-trip. I've got everything else except for the brake test. The last thing you're going to do is the brake test itself. Okay? Going through with the brake test. It's in your books. It's in an order. The reason that they write it in this order is for convenience. And the convenience of this brake test, if you do it in this order, it makes it very, very simple. I'm going to make sure my air pressure is built all the way up. Make sure that I am in neutral. I've got my seat belt on. I'm ready to go. The first test that I'm going to do is I'm going to check the air supplies to my truck itself. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to push in the clutch. I'm going to push in the air supplying to the trailer. By pushing that button in, air is now going to the trailer. I'm going to put this in a low gear. I'm not going to do it because we're inside. Put it in gear, release the clutch slightly, and tug against it, making sure that the trailer brakes are holding. Once I've done that, I'm going to take it back out of gear. I'm going to pull this button out. I'm going to push the tractor brake or your parking brake in. I'm going to put it in gear. I'm going to release the brake slightly. It holds. Now I know the air system is working to the truck. Okay? At this point, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push both buttons in. I'm going to put it in gear. I'm going to let the clutch out and roll forward about 5 miles an hour, and I'm going to gently step on the brakes, pushing the clutch back in. I'm going to feel whether the truck is pulling left or right, whether it's stopping smoothly. Okay? That completes the rolling portion of this test. At that time, you can put this in gear if you want to. Reach down, shut your engine off, turn your